Okay. Well, this is a much more earlier stage project. We certainly don't have any production at this point, and we don't have a mine or geologist, so I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. The disclaimer, I guess the investment highlights at this stage are that this project is marked with being the new kid on the block. You know, we've got a low market cap, as compared to other ASX listed companies that are in the same space. We're bringing ore in from New Caledonia, quite high grade ore, 2-3 times higher than most of the dry laterites that you see in Australia. So grade is king, and I think we've probably all heard that story. We're building the plant in Townsville. Townsville's got a long reputation since 1987, importing about 50 million tonnes of ore from various locations throughout the Pacific, mostly New Caledonia. We've also got quite rapid growth potential because we haven't got a mine. The approvals process to get the plant up and running is very short, and we're targeting about 18 months to final investment decision before we start constructing the plant. Oop, other way. Okay, the story so far is that PM1 acquired 100% of the shares in Queensland Pacific Metals back towards the end of May. Since that time, we've secured a binding offtake agreement with 2 of the major mining companies in New Caledonia. That's a 15-year agreement for 600,000 tonnes a year. We've entered into a royalty agreement for use of the technology, the direct nickel technology, for processing the ore and producing an intermediate product, an MHP. We've also entered into an arrangement with the CSIRO to develop the refining process to use the MHP, the nitrate-based MHP, into a standard solvent extraction ion exchange process to produce both nickel and cobalt sulfates, high purity sulfates for battery precursors. We've also acquired 400 hectares of land just out of Townsville, and we've got Lycopodium at the final stages of completing a PFS. So a snapshot of what the project's all about: importing ore out of New Caledonia, shipping it to Australia. I've been out in the booths talking to various people along the day, and it costs us about $9 to ship a tonne of ore from New Caledonia, 2,200 kilometres, into Townsville, and it really just shows up the problem with the tyranny of distance in Australia with trucking. You know, you barely truck something 100 kilometres for that price. It's crazy. Townsville, I mentioned before, is a great place to do business in, particularly in this sector, because Queensland Nickel, you may or may not know, has been importing ore for quite a long time, and all the infrastructure's in place at the wharf, at the Port of Townsville, I meant to say, and there's a very familiar campaign with what this is all about, and the approvals and facilities are all in place. We're using the direct nickel process because we believe it recycles nitric acid, and we believe it's one of the better options out there. I like to think of it as the 5th generation of processing, whereby you can come up with a plant that's more scalable, and certainly has a significantly lower capital cost, and of course has all the environmental benefits of recycling acid and using all the metals that are normally end up in the tailings dam. We've at bench scale we've produced both nickel sulfate and cobalt sulfate, and we're targeting the EV market. We haven't established any offtake agreements at this point. It's too early in the company's development. We have there about 25,000 tonnes. Well, it's about 28,000 tonnes, a little bit more, but it puts us in the mid-range of potential sulfate producers around the world. So just a simplified snapshot: laterite ore, processing using nitric acid, atmospheric pressure, called the DNI process, to produce an MHP. We strip out the iron, the magnesium or magnesia, the aluminium hydroxide and scandium at that stage, and then the MHP, it's about a 44% contained nickel MHP, so it's quite high grade, into the CSIRO process for producing nickel and cobalt sulfates and possibly manganese. Townsville, as I said before, it's an ideal location. You see all that red stuff in the, that's berth 2, that's the old Queensland nickel berth. About 3.5 million tonnes has been moving in through that port for, of laterites from around the Pacific Rim since 1987, so people are very familiar with how it all works. We've got a skilled labour force. There is over 1,200 people working at Queensland Nickel, so there's at least 3 generations of experienced process guys and chemical engineers that are now doing fly-in, fly-out operations out of Townsville. So they're really keen to find a home base back in Townsville in a similar industrial environment to what they've been used to. We've got acid supply. Both Korean zinc produce about 700,000 tonnes of sulfuric acid that we need for the refinery, for the sulphate process. And just down the road at Caledonia, Orica produce nitric acid. And although we recycle 98.5% of our nitric acid, we do have a fresh acid makeup, so we need to buy some acid in, and that'll come from Orica. I guess a comment there, IM3 or Imperium 3, part of Boston Global, are also building proposing and have just completed a pre-feasibility study to build a battery plant right alongside of us. So, you know, should both projects proceed, it'll be a great opportunity to supply over the fence and develop some other synergies along the way. The ore's coming from New Caledonia, and for those that don't know, it's about 2,200 k due east of Brisbane, I suppose, and it's been traditionally supplying lots of laterites around the world. Currently exports about 7.5 million tonnes to POSCO, Sumitomo, PAMCO, Mitsui. I've probably missed a few there. And the balance, there's about 6.5 million tonnes that's processed in country at Glencore's Koniambo project as a ferronickel. SLN, of course, that's been mining in New Caledonia for over 100 years, and Vale more recently down at Proney in the south end of the island with a HPAL producing both nickel and cobalt oxides. I've just taken a snapshot there of ore supply into Queensland Nickel. Queensland Nickel started importing in 1987, but that's just the last few years. And you can see the the consistency of grade, the consistency of tonnage over the years, and that's what we would expect coming into our project. The DNI process for processing the ore and making MHP, the CSIRO built a plant, spent about $6 million, and that's a snapshot. If you can see that photograph there, it's quite a good. So it's 1 tonne a day, which, as pilot plants go, that's quite a sizable plant. And the most important thing is it replicates all aspects of the process, including the recycle stream. So, you know, the filter presses and the feed system and the whole lot it replicates what's going to be built at a commercial scale. The most important thing about it is that the fact that it recycles the acid means that there is no acid left in the tailings to be neutralised, but also we're actually able to take all the metals out of solution, so there's no dissolved metals left in the residue that goes to tailings. The consequence of both having no acid and no dissolved metals is that you end up with quite a benign residue that will turn into an engineered landfill, so there'll be no requirement for a tailings dam. I guess I should have commented there as well. All those combined, all those features mean that you can build the plant from conventional materials of construction. Most of this plant is 304 stainless steel, some's 316, but very easy to be fabricated and produced in Townsville even, and so not a long period of construction, and certainly because there's no exotic materials, the capital cost is significantly lower than the conventional HPAL thinking. As I said before, we've already produced some product just to make sure that we're confident we can do it. The CSIRO are developing that process. We thought the CSIRO was a great place to start because they've prior to this they've completed all the work with BHP to produce sulphate out of the Kwinana feedstock. Granted, the feed is an LME grade metal, but certainly the CSIRO have worked very closely with them and developed the process to produce the high purity product, so they're very familiar with the requirements and have built up a wealth of information in that field. The plant site is, I mentioned before, about 35k south of Townsville. It's on the main highway to Charters Towers, so it's on a road train route, so we can cut up to 125 tonne out along the road to the plant, which keeps the transport costs down and the moving from port to plant at quite a sensible level. Initially, we've got a dry residue area because we'll be required to self-perform for the first little while to demonstrate that we can produce a non-leachable residue that passes all the TCLP tests and other waste requirements. We completed a scoping study back in May, and the fundamentals of the scoping study indicated that the capital cost was going to be around the $300 million. We had an internal rate of return after tax of about 24%, EBITDA of about 128 million Aussie, and revenues of a bit over 240 million per annum Australian again. So the process stands up commercially, and we think we're off to a good start. Very last but not least, I should point out that the OPEX, everybody likes to look at what's the cost per pound of nickel with all the credits, all the co-products and the cobalt credit taken back. Well, in this case it's about $93 a pound. So from our operating cost point of view, it's in the arena of the rest of the projects that are out there. I said that it's pretty quick to get into production. Well, I guess we're a little bit optimistic, but nevertheless, the schedule takes us through to the end of or the early part of 2021, where we're ready to start construction. The corporate, am I already going over, am I? Oh, right. The corporate overview, we've got about 4.5 million shares of, 471 million shares on issue. Current market cap is about $8 million. I don't need to tell people about what the nickel market's doing. It's up over the $8 and things are going well. Why invest? Just a summary: high-grade ore, positive scoping study so far, PFS coming out pretty soon, near-term production, Townsville location, battery market fundamentals, lots of growth potential, and a very experienced management team. Thanks very much for your time.